director at SEEN. We are community energy specialists based in Edinburgh and down in Liverpool. We work across the UK. I'll tell you a little bit more about our company in a bit, but first off, what are we doing today? Why are we all here? So this is a workshop series of 4 workshops introducing concepts around community-led energy. It's funded by the North East and Yorkshire Net Zero Hub. This is going to cover the technologies, which is what we're going to look at today. So the technologies and the development of different technologies as communities. We're then going to look at the project development process tomorrow. So same time tomorrow, we'll be looking at all the steps you undertake from the initial ideas to actually implementing an energy project. We'll then talk on the kind of potentially more complex areas of financing and governance, and lastly around things like procurement and commercial setup of community organizations and projects. So it's a kind of a flow from where we're going to start today of what have we got to work with to the final, these are all the tools you need to take forward a community energy project. The workshop is aimed at an introduction. There'll be many of you in the room who already have a ground knowledge of some of this, whether it's the engineering side of technologies or the financing side of projects. I have no doubt, a wealth of experience in the room. We'd really like to tap into that. We'd really like you to take part and share your experience. And we will be sharing as much of ours as we can. I will be the workshop lead, so I will be talking a lot, I'm sorry to say. And my colleagues, Eve and Reese, who will introduce themselves in a second, will be running parts of the workshop. Eve will be running the core part of this workshop slightly later on. So I will take you through the agenda. If Reese, you could just jump to the next slide. I've given us some timings to try and stick to. Whether we manage that or not, we will see. And you'll be pleased to know there are a couple of breaks in here. We're looking at introductions where we'll go around the room, do very quick introductions of who we are, what our interests are, and so forth. I'll tell you a little bit about SEEN. We'll talk a little bit about the Northeast Net Zero Hub. And we'll also talk a bit about community energy in the Northeast and Yorkshire, which is the geographic focus of these workshops, before moving on to my colleague Eve's presentation around low carbon technologies and community energy projects. We'll have a break about 10:30, which will be a 15-minute break, give you time to get a coffee, to take a bit of a breather, before we have a workshop. The workshop will be participative, so we'll be looking for everyone to take part, and it's a kind of a look at how we might develop a theoretical energy project as the group in the room. We then have another break after the hour-long workshop, which will be 5 or 10 minutes. At this point, we have essentially an optional Q&A session. So if you've got another meeting at 11:30, that's fine. We don't mind if you drop off, or if you've just completely had enough of listening to me, again, that's completely fine. The question and answer session is a time when we will be online. We will be sat here to be asked questions. So if you want to talk to us about a specific project, or you have a question about what we've been presenting, then please jump back on after that short break, and we can have a proper conversation one-to-one with different people in the room about anything you would like. If you stay for the full event, I think we will be wrapping up by about midday. I hope that's okay with everyone, and I hope everyone can stay for the duration. So, enough of me. Let's do some, well, nearly enough of me. Let's do some introductions around the room. So, Reese, you could jump to the next slide. What we want here is something nice and short. There are about 15 of us in the room, so this could take a long time if we go into a lot of detail. But we will do a quick, your name, who you're representing, if you are representing an organization or a community, about your project or generally your interests in community-led energy, and then anything you might want to get out of today. So effectively, why you're here. I'll run around very quickly our team before passing around the room. Once you've said something, if you could nominate someone else in the room, so just pick a name and ask them to go next, that would be great. So I've mentioned already, my name is Sandy Robinson. Sorry, we just got someone joining the room. I'll wait 2 seconds. Hi, Mark. We're just doing introductions, so I thought I'd wait 2 seconds to bring you into the conversation. So my name is Sandy Robinson. I'm a director at Scene. My background has been in community energy for the last 11 or 12 years now, developing energy projects in the Northwest Highlands to my work around Liverpool and in the southeast of England. We've been working on heat networks, on solar panels, EV car clubs. So I've got a lot of experience in this sort of thing. Our team is based across the UK. I won't talk too much about that because I've got a section about Scene. But if I just pass on now for my colleagues Eve and then Reese to say hi.
Hiya, I'm Eve. I'm an engineer at Scene. I have worked on many community energy projects around the UK and also internationally. I predominantly work on the more technical side of things, so looking at different technology sizing and different technology options based on the particular sites and the particular wants and needs of the clients. But yeah, today I'll be talking you through some of these technologies and some of the energy systems that can help communities kind of put them into place. Yeah, Reese, would you like to go next?
Morning, everyone. I'm Reese. I'm a consultant at Scene. I have a background in environmental science originally, but now I'm really interested in building energy efficiency and kind of building energy modeling. I'm based at the Liverpool office with Sandy too.
Reese, you were supposed to pass on to someone, but I will pass on for you to Susan, who's from the Northeast Net Zero Hub, to say hi.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Sue Manson. I'm the Community Energy Development Officer for the Northeast and Yorkshire Net Zero Hub. So we're organising these series of workshops. My role is to support community energy groups and projects from initial idea through to hopefully securing funding, investment and implementation. A large part of my role is about signposting people to information, funding, other potential modelling, groups who've done the same sort of thing to help share learning and information. My background isn't in energy, it's in terms of supporting and working with communities and helping people develop their projects. So that's pretty much my bit, and I'll hand on to Raymond.
Who had to switch his microphone on? Sorry. Yeah, Raymond Wolfson, working with Alwoodley Community Energy. We're really starting up, so we're exploring all the options and what we need to do to get started properly in our Alwoodley community. So this workshop and hopefully one or two of the others, I'm hoping will help us basically just be better informed. Time to hand over to somebody.
Hi, my name's Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, my name's Mark. I volunteer at a food growing co-op in North Yorkshire. We're based in a super rural area. We've had an energy audit done, and at the moment we're applying for grants to try and resolve the fabric first issues before moving on to the renewable energy side of things. So what I'm wanting to get out of today is to be able to contribute, but also to learn from others' experiences and to understand more about the role of Create. Thanks.
Right. Maybe I'll just start nominating. How about we go with Ian Dickinson next?
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm in the same group as Raymond. It's lovely to see him here this morning. We're Alwoodley Community Energy. We haven't got an official organisation or name just yet. It's all got to be registered. But as Raymond has explained, we're in the process of finding our feet, finding out information of what we need to do to get started and what the best options are for the actual organisation of the business as well. We've been looking at that over the past few days, just what type of organisational structure would be best for our group, and yeah, we're just on a fact-finding mission. So, like Raymond, I'll probably be joining a couple of other sessions as well that are going on. And hopefully we can get some really useful information today from all of yourselves. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ian. Next on my list is Andrew Holt. Andrew, you're on mute if you are talking there. Sorry, it also mutes you.
Sorry about that. My name's Andrew. I work as an energy efficiency consultant with contractors that basically go out and survey for the likes of solar and LED lighting, right down to heat pumps, and basically anything that brings technology savings to various customers. So I'm very happy to help anybody with their projects. Everything is surveyed free of charge. We then will produce quotations outlining the carbon emission reductions and return of investment, and hopefully that will lead to presenting to yourselves for funding, help gain your funding towards the installations of what's required for you to save money. And that's us, basically. Yeah, that's me, done and dusted. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Next, I have George Regen. I think Regen might not be your last name.
Yeah, no, George Middlemiss, actually. But yeah, hi, everyone. I'm George from Regen. So Regen work closely with Northern Power Grid on their programme of community energy support for organisations in the region. So I'm not actually here representing a community energy group, but just keen to meet everyone and yeah, be part of the conversation.
Great, thanks, George. Then we have Leanne Williams.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Leanne.
Ah, great. Good morning. Hi, well, I'm based in Hull, and I've had a lot of involvement with campaigning. I've been a campaigner with Friends of the Earth in the past on food and energy. And I was a previous director of Zero Carbon Yorkshire and built a Yorkshire-wide community renewable energy network. So I've got real interest in seeing how things are going at the moment. I think in this particular area, Hull and East Riding, there's not as much going on as there should be. And I've had a lot of conversations with people. It'd be nice to build some kind of a network around here to find the interest, get people more interested in this sort of thing, and point people towards people like yourselves. I had some conversations with local authorities recently, and I'm looking at particularly villages in the East Riding, just to get people off the ground, to see if people are interested and then point them in the right direction. So anything I can be involved with like this, which will help keep me up to date and, you know, learn from what people are doing and and that is really useful to me.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Next on the list, I see Oluwafemi.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. My name is Oluwafemi. I come from the consulting side, so I work for Lucian Group, and so I do basically carbon reporting and energy audit, energy efficiency, and things like that. And I think one of the things that brought me here was the opportunity I had previously to work with Durham County Council. I mean, doing things around managing energy within the council estate, decarbonization and things like that. And that was when I was doing my master's degree in Durham University. So kind of things that I like to learn here. I think when I was with Durham County Council, I got to know a lot about district heating and opportunity for heating through mine water and things like that that the team was working on at that point in time. So moving off into the private sector, there's a bit of change, and I think maybe one day or thereabout, I may have to find my way back to the public sector because of the beautiful thing they do over there towards decarbonizing infrastructure. So that's one of the things that brought me here, just to pick some learnings and see how I can get some things. And also because I think there were some takeout from some of the experience I had speaking with some of the colleagues from Sweden about district heating network. So I feel like it's a good place for me to be, to just come learn and see, build my network and interact with senior people like people on the call. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I think last, hopefully not least, we have Victoria Russell.
Hi, I'm Victoria Russell. I'm from Community First Yorkshire. We are the infrastructure support organisation for the VCSE sector in North Yorkshire. We've previously run some energy related projects. For example, we've done sort of decarbonising, helping village halls to decarbonise in Richmondshire and Scarborough. So we're looking to kind of build on that really. And I'm here particularly to expand my technical knowledge about these matters because I have very little. So I'm hoping I can come up with some more knowledge for today.
Okay, brilliant. Well, nice to meet you all. We've got a range of experience, as I kind of alluded to in the room, from the consultancy side to this just starting out on the community energy journey side. So we will do our best to cater for all of that. But I apologize if we are covering topics that you know well in some instances. Before we get started on the kind of center, the key part of this workshop today, I just wanted to do a little introduction to who Scene are, as a company. Why are we here? What are we doing? And what our ethos is, basically. So as set out on the screen there, over a nice graphic of the Northwest Highlands, we focus on local energy with local ownership. We have been working in the community energy sector. I think you can fairly call it a sector since 2011, and seen the various changes that have happened over that very long time frame of how community energy projects develop. Initially, we were based in Scotland, based in Edinburgh, where our head office still is, and we worked a lot over the Highlands, doing things like, if you just skip to the next slide, Reese, putting up big wind turbines. So these are kind of turbines up in the Lanarkshires or in Northwest Highlands and so forth. And the reason we were looking at these types of big infrastructure projects was there was a subsidy to support it. There was an opportunity for, well, anyone to take on an energy project, but often that suited communities or local landowners who we typically work with. So we kind of did projects such as shared ownership, where communities would get on board with a local farmer and put some wind turbines in place, that kind of thing. Over the years, the focus in the energy sector, and particularly in the community energy sector, has changed to looking at more local energy development. And by that, I mean generating and using energy locally. The rationale behind that being the changes in subsidy and so forth. So since our early days of larger infrastructure projects, we now work a lot in, if you just skip to the next slide, Reese, things like retrofit and building-based low carbon measures in terms of, I mean, this is a pretty simple house we have in front of us, but it may be anything from a small domestic property to a sports hall to a community centre to a council office, that sort of thing, looking at how we decarbonize a building from first principles. So we look at energy efficiency, we look at local electricity generation in terms of solar PV, we look at heat generation from heat pumps, from different forms of technology. And yeah, we have a very kind of broad scope. We call ourselves technology agnostic. We don't focus on one specific technology. We try and provide the best solution for a specific location. And that's really important for community energy because it's very location based. It's very based around a community of people that want to do something and want to achieve a set number of outcomes, whether that's an economic benefit or whether that's a societal benefit in kind of improving community cohesion, the kind of less obvious benefits from community energy projects. So that's where we've been working. I think we have one more slide just on the local energy systems. If we just jump to that. So this is an example of a project. Here we have a care home up in Stirlingshire. We designed a solar PV system, electric vehicle charging for those who live in the care home, but also their families to use for day trips, that kind of thing, as well as some significant battery storage to try and take this energy we're using or generating locally and try and maximize how much can be used at this site rather than sending it all to the national grid. So we have a kind of expertise in localism, in understanding communities, in defining energy solutions for communities or with communities, more importantly, and helping to implement them. So today we're trying to share some of that knowledge with yourselves, to share some of our processes and to share some of our resources, our understanding of things like suitable funders or tools you can use to look at opportunities in your area. So that's a background on SEEN. I think we can move on to talking about the Net Zero Hub. Sue, do you want to cover this or are you happy for me to?
No, quite happy for you to cover it, but give a shout if I can input or any particular questions that you're not familiar with.
Sure. Yeah, on the point of questions, please raise a hand. There's a little button you can press at the bottom of the screen if you want to ask any questions during the workshop. So this workshop series has been funded by the Northeast Net Zero Hub. It's one of the 5 hubs across England. They kind of align to the local enterprise partnership boundaries, and they provide a whole host of things. They're funded by the UK government via the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. They are looking to stimulate energy development in their areas. So looking at attracting commercial investment into projects, trying to accelerate progress towards net zero, looking at scaling up net zero projects, and kind of delivering a support mechanism, whether that's for community energy projects or for larger infrastructural projects in the Northeast and Yorkshire, and as we're doing today, trying to do knowledge transfer, trying to share information between not just those in the Northeast, but around the UK, and trying to stimulate low carbon activity, low carbon projects through training and through information sharing. And then lastly, looking at raising awareness. So raising awareness around what's possible in terms of energy and net zero. What can you do to take part in this, and trying to make things happen in that sense. So it's a kind of enablement as well as an investment vehicle. Next slide. So particular to community energy, the Net Zero Hubs are delivering the Community Energy Fund, which some of you may already have heard of. I will talk about that in a second. But beyond that, they're also looking at a lot of these ways of kind of supporting communities with their strategies, with their knowledge, with their capabilities. So there's Community Energy Steering Group. So that's kind of bringing together those with knowledge around community energy, those with the skills in community energy to provide a kind of strategic oversight and advice in the local area. We're looking at kind of building capacity through carbon literacy training, through online resources, so case studies, which you can find on the Net Zero Hub website, through subsidizing energy audits, so providing energy audits to community buildings, which is a relatively recent project, I think. And then part of this engagement, we have these workshops. So the series of 4 workshops happening today, Thursday, Friday, and then on Tuesday. And alongside that, there will be some community energy surgeries. These are one-to-one sessions where you can book in an hour with an energy expert and talk about your interests and your plans. Those are in planning, as I understand it, and I don't think there's a date set for them, but please keep a lookout. You'll hear via the Net Zero Hub newsletters and so forth, and social media accounts if that's something you're interested in. So what is the Community Energy Fund? So this is a 10 million scheme, 10 million pound grant funding scheme for community energy projects. There have been previous funds like this that were targeted largely at rural communities. So some of you may have heard of the Rural Community Energy Fund around the kind of 2019-20, I think, which supported a lot of projects. This is the next iteration of that and actually includes urban communities as well, which is a really positive thing. There are rounds of funding kind of ongoing in each of the Net Zero Hub areas. So the current round is round 3, open for applications till the 13th of October. If you have an interest in that, you can talk to the Net Zero Hub to get some advice and support. Similarly, SEEN offers ad hoc advice to those applying or those who maybe want to get quotes from suppliers. So if you do want to talk about that directly with us, please feel free to drop me an email. I'll share my email address at the end. So the CEF, the Community Energy Fund, is focused on providing funding to community-based organisations. It's for the benefit of the local community. So it has to show that there will be beneficial impacts, whether that's financial, whether that's environmental, so air quality and carbon, or whether that's the societal benefits I was referring to. The funding is in 2 stages. So stage 1 is effectively feasibility. So I have a great idea, I'd like to test it. So that's up to 40,000, and that will allow you to test your idea. If you have a good idea that you've already done some feasibility testing on, you can look at detailed project development, which is stage 2. So that's up to £100,000, and that allows you to, take it to investment ready, basically. So, for instance, if you thought it's a really good idea for us to install solar panels on a community centre or community centres across my area, then you might get the £40,000 to do some testing, the economics, the technical specifications, that kind of thing, and then look at the stage 2 to get you a full business model to make sure you've got the funders on board or your investment strategies in place, your commercial models agreed and sorted, all your contracts, that kind of thing. So it's a 2-stage process. It works really well in that sense. There seems to be some in the room who may be interested in the stage 1. And one thing just to highlight here is that the proposals must show a community ownership as part of the project. So 50% community ownership is the guidance. And the reason for that is we want community ownership to deliver community benefit. We want community ownership to, say, generate money for the community or the community building or so forth. Raymond, do you have a question?
Just a quick one. Round 3 is open till 13th of October. Is a round 4 planned?
I think there will be, but Sue maybe can take that one.
Yeah, just to answer that, there's no round 4 planned. The current funding runs until March 2025. However, the round 3 will be appraised after the 13th of October. There's an appraisal process, so notifications of success or not would come out early in the new year, so there's no time in effect for another round. However, on that note, if you allocated funding as round 3, you have then got a year to complete your project, so you don't have to finish it by March 25. So no round 4 planned, but do keep in touch, because it's hopeful that there will be other funding, not necessarily through the hub, but other funding for community energy. So hopefully there will be more options going forward.
Okay, thanks. Because we're conscious it's just a little bit early for us. We might be able to put something together for October the 13th, but that will really be pushing it.
Yeah, and it's kind of thing that even if projects are not able to make the 13th of October deadline, it's still worth working projects up, because funds can open and have quite short windows. So if you're ready to go, even if you've missed one deadline, it makes it much easier for you if there's another funder comes available. And just a slight plug, if you're not already signed up to our mailing list, which I'll put the link in the chat, please sign up, because what I do tend to do is try to send round information about new funds just opening for community energy if you signed up. So that's an easy way, hopefully, to get information as it appears into your inbox.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, yeah, a really important point I think Sue is mentioned is around future funding. So Community Energy Fund is an opportunity right now. It's a really positive one. It's really worth investigating. But for those who, as we've just heard, maybe aren't quite at that point, we are anticipating further support for community energy, but we have no idea the scale nor the nature of it. It's the nature of when governments change, things take a little while to kick in, but the signs are positive, at least on that front, I would say. Okay, very quickly, here's a list of the community energy team. We have already met Sue, who's in the room, but we have Abby, who's their project manager and community energy lead, and Emma, who's project officer at the Energy Hub. Net Zero Hub. If you want to talk to them, there's an email up on the screen there. I think Sue's just dropped the newsletter link into the chat as well. So I will leave that with yourselves should you want to make contact. And then I think we have the wider team on the next slide. I'm not going to talk through all of, but there's a regional support. So for your region, there's someone specific at the Net Zero Hub. There we go, thanks Sue. So anyone on this list who fits your area, you're also welcome to reach out to them, I think. And just as an aside, they are recruiting a Tees Valley-based project manager. So if you happen to know someone or have an interest in that, there's an email there for you to check in with. Great. So I only have a couple more slides to talk through here. This is about community energy in the northeastern Yorkshire. Those good at geography might note that these boundaries aren't exactly the northeastern Yorkshire. I will tell you why in a second. But there's a couple of things to note here. This data on the screen comes from the Community Energy State of the Sector. It's conducted by Community Energy England, Community Energy Wales, and Community Energy Scotland on an annual basis. It tells us where community projects are, what type of projects there are, what are they doing, how much money are they raising, that kind of thing. Everything on the screen is a project that exists. When I say project exists, it might be someone's had an idea and they're pursuing it. So these are not necessarily installed projects, and they cover the northeast region as defined by Community Energy England's study, rather than the northeast and Yorkshire entirely. What's interesting here is we're quite dominant on solar, so those yellow pins are solar and relatively urban focused, so the solar is dotted around the cities. Not particularly unexpected. What is a little different to elsewhere in the UK is there's quite a low number of community energy projects, and particularly successfully installed energy projects in the northeast. Looking at England as a whole, the most successful organizations and most known organizations are largely, and this is complete generalization, but largely across the southeast. I can't give you the reasons exactly for that, but that's why things like this workshop and the efforts of people in the room are really important. We want to see that change. There are some really great networks in the northeast, from the Northeast Net Zero Hub supporting now, which is a great thing. Those such as Vaughan, who provide support and resources for community-led projects. So as you may have heard of them, we're seeing more projects coming through. So the Rural Community Energy Fund I referred to, whilst projects may have started in 2018, 19, 20, community energy projects can take a long time. So, you could spend 2 or 3 years developing a project where you're installing solar panels. You could spend, 8, 10 years developing something like a heat network, something quite complex. So we like to think we're positive that some of those projects are continuing their way through, and we will see more community energy projects appearing in the northeast, some of which I will talk through in a second. But yeah, I think there were 41 projects funded in the northeast through the Rural Community Energy Fund. I don't know how many are currently funded through the CEF, the current Community Energy Fund. But again, we like to see that as the start of the process, which will track through to more successful projects in the coming years. So a few examples just to show you who's doing what and maybe what's possible. Reece, jump to the next slide. These are 5 community energy projects, some of which have been installed, some of which are kind of in the works. I will run through them quickly, but just to tell you a little bit about them. So up in the top right there, we've got Ascraig Community Energy, or ACE. So they secured, I think, around £36,000 through the Rural Community Energy Fund. And that was looking at renewable energy options in the village of Ascraig. They've looked at heat networks, they've looked at solar, and they've appointed local energy ambassadors, so people to push forward the kind of local energy agenda, as well as doing kind of lower cost, high impact things like kind of addressing fuel poverty. So what's called warm and well packs, providing people with support through the funding that they've got, and running educational projects. So telling people about energy technologies, supporting transitions to LED lighting, that kind of thing. Slightly differently, we've got Berwick Community Trust in the middle there. As you can see, they've got some solar panels on the roof. They've also installed solar panels on local schools, sports centres, and they've commissioned a 500 kilowatt wind turbine, so a reasonably sized wind turbine. And that was done in 2014, so quite a while ago, one of the earlier projects in the northeast. Again, slightly differently, we've got Derwood Valley Car Club. This is showing you what is considered community energy is not just wind turbines and solar panels. It's looking at things like providing low carbon transport, which is not just lower carbon, but provides a service. So it's a car club that the community can access to book and take cars around whilst generating revenue for the community group. So there's lots of different models of community energy, some of which we'll talk through today. Then the last 2 at the bottom here, we've got Bishop Auckland Churches, which is the Bishop Auckland Sustainable Energy Scheme. This was taking 5 churches in the Bishop Auckland area and developing renewable energy solutions for them. So you see some solar panels in the background, again, demonstrating maybe the dominance of solar as one of the simpler technologies to implement, but also showing that community extends beyond your typical community center. It's, you know, options around religious buildings, around community spaces, around that kind of thing. So, you know, an interesting difference in that regard. And then lastly, we have Circular, Malton and Norton. KIC is a community interest company. It's a form of governance model, commercial model for a community organization. They looked at anaerobic digestion. Anaerobic digestion is essentially taking waste and turning it into heat and electricity. It's looking at taking waste from around the 2 towns. So typically you're talking agricultural waste. And they got £40,000 to the Rural Community Energy Fund to test the feasibility of this. So they've got a couple of sites. They're looking at generating biogas and then turning that into either electricity or using that as a transport fuel. So I don't know the current status of that project, but it shows you that there's some kind of more, I don't know, innovative, but more unusual approaches to energy included within the community energy sector. So I think that's me covered a bit of the background. We've got the low carbon technology sections. I see Sue's posting some information about the CEF projects. If you are interested, please take a look in the chat. So that's funded projects so far, as well as a full list of those funded projects around the UK. We're going to now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Eve. We're going to talk a bit about the various technologies that are out there, various technologies that might be suitable for communities to utilize. As ever, please stick your hand up and ask any questions you have. We'll spend half an hour on this and then we'll have a 15-minute break, cup of tea and a bit of a relax. So I'll pass you over to Eve.
Great, thank you. And yeah, apologies for we're running slightly late, but I won't make that break too late. So in this first workshop, I thought we'd talk about low carbon technologies, kind of cover like the basics that you need to know and sort of apply to, and what kind of technologies might be suitable for your area. So if Reese, could you move to the next slide, please? So initially, we'll be doing a very high level overview of a variety of low carbon technologies. We then might touch on a few successful community energy projects and look at what makes them successful. We'll then look at different types of energy systems and finally do a low carbon technologies workshop at the end, which sort of covers everything that we will have discussed this morning. Cool. So starting with solar PV panels. So hopefully this is something that everyone is at least somewhat familiar with. Solar PV uses photovoltaic cells to convert sunlight directly into electricity. So these are cells that are often made of silicon. They absorb sunlight and generate an electric current through the photovoltaic effect. So these are widely used across the UK. They can be used for residential and commercial uses, but also utility scale power generation. So they're incredibly versatile. And that's one of the kind of big pros of solar PV. They're incredibly scalable, and kind of the larger the scale, often the lower the cost per kilowatt. So you can really achieve economies of scale if you're looking at a big solar array, but also in the kind of community context, if you're looking at a lot of properties that each have a small array, you can also achieve economies of scale like that. In terms of the cons, these systems are dependent on sunlight, and therefore their electricity generation isn't consistent throughout the day, as you might imagine. They also do have a high capital costs, which can be a barrier to individuals, and they do require some space, whether that be on rooftops or open space. The second electricity technology is wind power. So wind is used to produce electricity by converting kinetic energy into electricity. So in modern wind turbines, the wind turns the rotor blades. This converts kinetic energy into rotational energy, and then this is transferred to a shaft which connects to the generator, and that produces electrical energy. So once a turbine is installed, the main cost is maintenance. So that's a good pro. They're very space efficient. So, and it can fit well with other land uses. So, for example, you can spread wind turbines across fields, and the space below can still be used for other uses, such as farming or any other existing uses in most cases. The significant cons of wind turbines are that they can be dangerous to some wildlife, birds and bats colliding with them. They can also be noisy, both from the blades moving through the air, but also the mechanical noise of the power generating machinery that's inside of them. Next slide, please. Looking at hydropower, so this uses the movement of water to produce mechanical power, and this is then converted into electricity in hydroelectric power plants through an electric generator. There are big pros to hydropower. The amount of water that passes through them can be controlled, so the amount of energy generated can be adapted to whatever needs are required at the time. Over the long term, they can be inexpensive, and they also pair well with other renewables. So it can be used to provide energy when solar or wind are not available. On the negative side, they are quite significant structures, and they can have an adverse impact on the physical environment around them. The capital cost is also quite high, and they're only suitable in certain locations. In terms of wave and tidal energy, so wave and tidal stream energy, it's electricity that's generated from the movement of wave and tidal flows. So wave power is much more predictable than some other renewable energy sources, and actually increases in the winter when electricity demand is at its highest. So it matches quite well with demand. Tides also have really high energy density compared to wind and other energy sources. So it means that not much power is wasted in converting that wave energy into electricity. On the downside, again, this is expensive to build. There's a potential environmental risk to the seashore, and you really have to find the sites that are suitable. Moving on to a few heat technologies. So first, the ground source heat pump, which is a great solution for a lot of community projects. So ground source heat pumps transfer heat from the ground basically to heat in a building. And they can also heat water that's stored in a hot water cylinder. So that's ready to use for example, hot taps or showers. Thermal transfer fluid flows are used to transfer heat from the ground into the home. Ground source heat pumps are highly efficient. They can reduce overall energy usage and therefore energy bills. And they help with the kind of larger goal that we have of electrifying heat. Some of the barriers to installing ground source heat pumps are that, again, a high installation cost, and you do require an outdoor space. And the installation itself can be quite disruptive. In a lot of cases, you're drilling boreholes, which, although once it's installed, have a minimal impact, it can be quite disruptive and loud while that drilling is taking place, as you can imagine. In terms of air source heat pumps transfer heat from outside air into water, and that can be used then as space heating or water heating again. Pros of air source heat pumps are that, again, they're more efficient than traditional boilers. They're not quite as efficient as ground source heat pumps, but they're still more efficient than traditional boilers, and therefore reduce the overall energy used. And this can help contribute to reducing energy bills. Again, one of the cons is high upfront installation costs and the space requirements. Air source heat pumps are not suitable for some listed buildings or protected areas. So if you're working with a conservation area, that's something that you do have to work around. They're also less efficient in really cold weather. Next slide, please. Yes. Staying on the heat pumps, moving to water source heat pumps. So water source heat pumps, as you can imagine, extract heat from natural bodies of water, lakes and rivers, or kind of man-made water sources as well. They transfer heat into buildings, again, for space or heating water. They work similarly to ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps, but they're often more efficient due to the relatively stable temperature of water. These are, as I say, efficient systems because the temperature of the water doesn't vary significantly and have the same pros as reducing energy bills and electrifying heat. But you do have to have the right location for water source heat pumps. You do need to have that water source quite nearby. Again, the installation cost can be prohibitive, and there are very specific space requirements for water source heat pumps. Moving next on to something slightly different, which is solar thermal. So, oh yeah, Raymond. Did you have a question? Raymond, I can see your hand raised.
Yes, sorry, I was turning the microphone on again.
That's all right.
The water source heat pump. Are we talking here about subsurface water or surface water?
Well, water source heat pumps can be used for, well, can draw heat from surface or subsurface. So the kind of examples of surface water that you're drawing from would be like lakes or rivers, but also you can look at underground aquifers, which would be the subsurface. So if you have got an underground aquifer, that could be a potential water source.
Okay, because presumably that would be warmer.
Yeah.
Depending on how deep it is.
Just to add in here, there's not a huge difference between how a ground source and water source operate. Their terminology is slightly different, but with a ground source heat pump, you're operating quite like an air source, a water source heat pump, particularly open loop ground source heat pumps, which draw up from an aquifer, as Eve was suggesting, and also relevant to the Northeast. And maybe some of you have seen this in the news recently, things like mine water heating. So taking water from old mines and using that to provide a thermal resource for a heat pump. So that is both subsurface, but also using water. Andrew.
Yeah. Does this sort of technology require agricultural engineering plans, and who would fund that?
Sorry, I missed part of that. I heard engineering plans.
Yeah, right. We're doing projects with engineering, agricultural engineers. Yeah, so that cost could be anything up to £10,000. Would that be a part of the funding?
Yes. So maybe to speak to particular, well, maybe a hypothetical. If a community were to take forward a water source heat project, so whether it's a river or whether it's a mine or whether, the first stage would be feasibility. So it would be testing the concept up to a certain stage. So kind of getting an idea of whether it works, doing an initial understanding of the water temperatures and creating a techno-economic model. But the detailed design, which I think you're talking about, would probably be within a stage 2 community energy fund. So it's more detailed project development. A technology like this would require detailed design.
Yeah, okay. And that becomes part of a funding exercise through the community energy fund.
Yes, it definitely could. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So moving away from heat pumps and onto solar thermal. Solar thermal is often used in domestic sites. So it captures sunlight to generate the heat and then heats the water. These systems often use mirrors as well to capture and focus the sunlight. These are efficient, large-scale heat producers, and they have the ability to kind of store the heat and use it later. And we'll talk about energy storage a bit later. Again, the cons of this are that they are limited to kind of sunny regions and require the space. So perhaps not entirely useful for the Northeast, but an important technology to be aware of. So looking at geothermal energy. So geothermal energy is all energy stored in the form of heat beneath the surface of solid earth. And these are geothermal energy plants are often quite large and not necessarily suitable for communities, but again, it's important to be aware of, and there might be a situation where this is advantageous. So geothermal energy provides a really reliable and constant source of renewable heat that's not dependent on weather conditions at all. In terms of the spatial footprint on the ground, or above the ground, it's very low, and it's really scalable. So it can be used to heat individual homes, but also whole district heating networks. But in terms of the cons, geothermal power plants can only be built in certain locations, and there are certain geological situations and circumstances that are necessary for it. They usually require geothermal reservoirs at a really high heat, and they're often quite expensive to build because of the drilling, because they're quite intrusive to the earth. And the expensive drilling to the earth to access these reservoirs can be quite expensive. The deep drilling, there's also the potential that it causes instability underground. And then you're looking at problems like earthquakes on the Earth's surface. So this is quite a high level source of energy and source of heat, but one that is, as I say, very efficient, very stable and reliable. Combined heat and power is a highly efficient. It's more of a process than its own technology, but it captures and utilizes the heat that is a byproduct of the electricity generation process. So by generating heat and power simultaneously, you can reduce carbon emissions by up to 30% compared to sort of if you were separately producing heat and electricity by like a boiler and a power station, for example. And the heat generated during this process, will be supplied to an appropriately matched heat demand that would otherwise be met by a conventional boiler. The pros of this are that it's highly efficient. It makes use of heat that would otherwise be wasted when you're generating electricity or mechanical power, and it also reduces transmission and distribution losses. The cons are that they are, again, expensive to set up. They're generally only suitable for sites where there's a constant load requirement. So you're thinking maybe industrial sites or somewhere that space heating is required all the time with on-site power. Moving on to the final technology that I'll briefly run through is biomass energy. So biomass, it's a renewable energy source generated from burning wood, plants, other organic matter, perhaps manure, maybe household waste. It does release carbon dioxide when it's burned, but significantly less than fossil fuels. It's good because it's reliable, it's abundant, and it helps reduce waste, but growing crops specifically for biomass can require significant space, and a lot of storage is required, specifically where you're burning the biomass. And as I said before, it still releases carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And currently it's not as efficient as other energy sources, but it's a good option out there. And it is, as I say, more kind of low carbon than your like traditional gas boiler. We have passed half past, but I'm going to carry on whizzing through this presentation. So Reese, if you could move to the storage technologies, great. So there are a few different storage technologies that you should consider when you're thinking about low carbon technologies. So the first is battery storage, electrical storage in batteries. Batteries. So batteries are often in the form of lithium ion or lead acid. That should be battery storage there. They store electricity in chemical form and they release it when needed. So they're commonly used in residential, commercial, and grid applications. They offer a fast response time for electricity delivery. They're scalable for different applications. They can be replaced quite easily, and they can be deployed without geographic constraints. They do, however, have a limited lifespan and capacity degradation over time, so they do need to be replaced, and there are high upfront costs associated, especially for larger installations. There are also some environmental concerns related to mining and disposal of battery minerals. The second type of storage is thermal storage. So thermal storage systems, they capture heat or cold and use it later. So this is efficient for storing a large amount of energy, particularly with heating or cooling. It's relatively low cost compared to other storage systems and can provide energy on demand. So even when the primary source is unavailable, however, you can get some significant energy loss during storage, which is why it's maybe better for larger scale storage solutions. And often you require a significant amount of space for thermal storage. Pumped hydro is another solution, which requires a significant bit of space, but it involves storing energy by pumping water from a lower reservoir to an upper one during times of excess electricity generation. So during high demand, water is then released back down, and that will generate electricity through the turbines. This is good as there's a high energy capacity and a long lifespan. It's particularly well suited again for large scale storage and a high level of efficiency, but it does require specific geographic conditions. So high initial construction costs are also associated for these large structures, and there might be an environmental impact of kind of creating these reservoirs. The final one that I'll just touch on is hydrogen storage. So this works by when there's excess electricity, this is used to produce hydrogen through electrolysis. And then the hydrogen can then be stored and converted back to electricity via fuel cells, or it can be burned in turbines itself when it's needed. It offers high energy density and can store energy for long periods. It's also very versatile in its applications. But at the moment, it does have quite low efficiency levels. The infrastructure is quite expensive for production, storage, and distribution. And there are other storage challenges associated with the kind of low density of hydrogen, but also the high flammability for this. Moving on to something slightly different, the energy efficiency of buildings. So this is something that I know at least one of you touched on here. So energy efficiency is all about using less energy to accomplish the same tasks. This will cut down on waste, reduce overall energy use, and therefore reduce overall energy bills, hopefully. So for communities looking to lower your carbon footprint, it's a really powerful tool. And actually, the housing stock and the building stock across the UK is very energy inefficient. So this is a great area. There's a lot of potential here, and some of it is quite low cost. So you can also improve the comfort of buildings. So you're not just reducing the amount of energy and the amount that's spent on energy, but you're making buildings nicer to be in, basically. As you can see in this diagram, energy is lost kind of through most parts of a building, but really key in this is kind of wall insulation, floor insulation, roof insulation. Thinking about your glazing, if you've got single glazing, there's a lot of energy being lost and a lot of heat being lost through your windows. So stuff like double glazing or secondary glazing in some cases, or even triple glazing is a key technology. There are also the kind of more low-hanging fruits, as we like to call them, of draft proofing and LED lighting. And these are really low cost, low intervention energy efficiency measures, which will have an immediate effect on energy consumption and your bills, and also the kind of comfort of the buildings. So if all buildings are retrofitted to be as energy efficient as possible, then the overall energy demand is reduced of the building. And so when we're looking at those renewable energy technologies that we kind of discussed earlier, these plants can be smaller because they have to produce less energy. And so this reduces the financial investment required, and it makes the project more feasible. So we always think of energy efficiency as kind of the first step. How can you initially reduce energy demand through energy efficiency? I'll quickly move on to the
I think we might have lost Eve there.
Eve,
you disappeared for a second.
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Okay, great. I'll pick out a few things. So the state of sector in 2023 was largely really positive, and I'll pull out a couple of key figures here. So the total capacity of community energy in the UK in 2023 was 398 megawatts. It generated 617 gigawatt hours, and this is crucially an increase of 180% in the previous 6 years. So this is definitely something that's growing. There are almost 800 people employed in the sector. It might be up to 800 right now. And 102 jobs were created in 2023 alone. 3,719 people are volunteering, which again is a massive increase of almost 120% since 2021. So that's just the last 2 years. This has a really positive impact on local economies. So through organizational expenditure and the community benefit funds that are set up by community groups, 12.9 million pounds has been contributed to local economies across communities. And there are 72 new energy advice and energy efficiency services that have been set up. So it's all really positive, and there's a lot of growth in the sector, and there seems to be a lot of support from the new government and the Community Energy Fund and all these net zero hubs. Everything is moving in a positive direction. So on that positive note, I'll just talk about a few successful community energy projects. So first, we've got Westmill Solar Farm. So this is located on the Wiltshire-Oxfordshire border. It is the UK's first and the world's largest cooperatively run community solar farm. So this is over 30 acres and 20,000 solar PV panels. It creates enough electricity that's equivalent to the consumption of 1,551 homes and prevents over 1.5 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year from being emitted. It's owned by over 1,500 members, and it's governed by a board of directors who were appointed by the members, but they're also members themselves. The day-to-day management of the site is contracted out, and the kind of higher level management is done by Energy for All, who also provide shareholder services. So thanks to the strong financial surplus of the solar park, they're also able to provide a community grant scheme, so that kind of supports community benefit activities for non-profits in the area. Another example is, you know what, we're running quite low on time. So, and Sandy has spoken about a few of the success stories, I guess. So moving quickly on to, sorry, we've got a question there. What is a general feeling from communities where large areas, where large areas of land are used by solar panels? Sandy, is this one that you're able to ask?
This is a difficult one. I think, I get the sense that you're referring to there's a lot of opposition to large solar farms. Often it's relatively reasonable. I think taking the community perspective and saying a huge part of the benefit of community energy is that, this is for the local area. So if you're developing a solar farm, you would then be saying, we're generating money which will be spent locally, whether that's on local services, whether that's on local assets like community centres, improvements, that kind of thing. And acceptance is more likely, but it's inevitable that there will be people who are opposed to such projects, which is a kind of community engagement task. We're currently installing a 2.6 megawatt solar farm up in near Dundee, which is funded through a community share raise. What we found there is that the planning process was actually quite straightforward, because we could prove that the benefit being delivered by the project was for community members and investors rather than for a private company. Yeah, it's a difficult one. Yeah.
Okay. Reese, I suggest we skip through these examples and briefly touch on what makes a successful community energy project. Sorry, we had another question there. Could you outline anaerobic digestion technology for heat power hydrogen production? Again, Sandy, is this something that you could touch on?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can come back to this when we get to the workshop. I'm very aware of time. Anaerobic digestion is, there aren't many community-led projects looking at anaerobic digestion, and most successful projects are kind of landowner-led because they are on farms. We're looking at things like manure being used to generate biogas. Often that's then used to generate electricity. In some instances, it's used for fuel, whether that's heating and occasionally for transport. The concept's quite simple, and in fact, it's employed worldwide at the kind of level of those without energy access or doing anaerobic digestion in some instances to generate gas for their cooking stoves. But what it effectively looks like as a piece of infrastructure is a large dome you will have seen where there's manure that is being used, being stored and digested anaerobically by bacteria to produce a gas. The hydrogen production side of things, very simply, there's a few ways of producing hydrogen, but it requires an energy input. There is technically ways of drilling for hydrogen, akin to oil and gas, often called white hydrogen, but that's not something that a community would be focused on. Hydrogen creation would require an electrical input. So there are examples where you generate electricity using wind turbine, use that electricity to split water to create hydrogen. Hydrogen can then be used for a variety of things. It could be used to generate electricity, although you wouldn't do that because you have a wind turbine already. You could use it for storage. It could be used as a transport fuel, although there are concerns about the reactivity as an element, so it has to be stored quite carefully. There are applications for hydrogen, but from my viewpoint, everyone has very different viewpoints on hydrogen. It's largely tied to things like grid scale storage, potentially industrial processes and large scale transport. So things like ferries, hydrogen ferries have been used worldwide. Again, these are larger scales of infrastructure and may not be suitable for community energy.
Great. And yeah, as just being mindful of time, I suggest we just skip straight to types of energy system, and we'll kind of discuss what makes a successful project and then the later challenges sort of in the workshop after everyone's had a little bit of a break. So briefly touching on types of energy system that are particularly relevant to communities and community energy. So first of all, we've got local energy systems. So this refers to energy generation, distribution, and management infrastructures that are owned, operated, or closely managed by a local community or cooperative. The key characteristics of local energy systems are decentralization. So you're not relying on large centralized power plants far away. Energy is generated locally and often using renewable sources. You also have energy independence. So communities have power over their energy supply, which can often lead to greater resilience. Key benefits of this are that you have reduced transmission losses because the energy is generated and used locally. And there are local economic benefits through the reinvestment of these profits into the local community. So there's benefit funds that are set up. Smart energy systems are also relevant. These integrate advanced technologies such as you might have sensors or automation and data analytics to optimize the generation, distribution, and consumption of energy. So these systems can monitor energy use in real time and adjust supply and demand to maximize the efficiency and reduce costs to the users and to the system as a whole, while incorporating the different energy sources. The key characteristics of this are digital monitoring, so smart meters, which many of you might have in your homes, and other monitoring devices to track the energy usage, And that also allows individuals to kind of understand and adjust your own energy consumption in real time. Another feature might be automation. So you'll have intelligent systems that can automatically control energy flows based on the demand, based on the weather conditions and the grid performance. And this would ensure the efficient use of renewable energy and hopefully reduce waste overall. These systems often include demand response, so allowing some kind of flexibility in energy demand and shifting energy intensive activities, for example, to a time when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining and generation is high and electricity prices are lower. Smart energy systems are generally integrated with a larger grid, so they can communicate with the national or regional grid to balance the local supply and demand, integrating energy more efficiently. So the key benefits of smart energy systems are this increased energy efficiency, cost savings, hopefully for consumers, and an improved integration of those renewable energy sources, which do depend on things like the weather. The next type of energy system to talk about, is just heat networks in the middle. So heat networks, you might have also heard of this as district heating. So these are systems where heat is generated in a centralized location and distributed to homes, businesses, or other buildings through a network of insulated pipes. So by centralizing this sort of heat production rather than having individual heating for each building, these can often work more efficiently than individual gas boilers or electric heating systems. They can be powered quite easily by renewable energy sources, and they're particularly useful in kind of dense urban areas if buildings are close together, but they can also serve the kind of more rural, spread out communities which can share their energy resources. So these networks significantly reduce carbon emissions by basically having more efficient technologies in them or renewable heating sources. This hopefully lowers the heating costs for consumers and reduces reliance significantly on those like fossil fuel based heating systems, like individual gas boilers for each property. Touching quickly on microgrids. So this is again a localized energy system, but it integrates energy sources to provide electricity this time to a defined area. So this might be a set of houses, it might be an industrial estate, it could be something like a university campus. They're designed to offer enhanced energy security, flexibility, and sustainability. So again, you're looking at local energy generation, power from local sources, incorporating hopefully renewable energy, but this can also be integrated with less renewable sources as well. Kind of microgrids also have the ability to operate independently. So a key feature is for them to be able to disconnect from the main power grid and function autonomously. So this is known as islanding, and this would provide resilience against the grid. These systems often incorporate some kind of energy storage when excess energy is generated during periods of low demand. So it can be used when like renewable sources aren't available. Microgrids, they can provide resilience and reliability, and they also offer energy independence for communities. They're really well suited for incorporating renewable energy sources, and in many cases, they can reduce energy costs by enabling that local energy generation, which does cut down on transmission losses. They could also allow for kind of a more advanced demand response strategies where, again, electricity use is shifted to when more energy is being generated and electricity is at a lower cost. Finally, energy clubs. So these are particularly relevant to communities because they're community-led initiatives, usually where groups of people come together to collectively manage and share locally generated energy. So the aim is to give individuals and communities more control over their own energy use. They help reduce carbon emissions, they promote energy independence, and they make energy more affordable. They're particularly relevant in the context of decentralizing energy systems and enhancing community engagement in the renewable energy transition. And kind of a key feature of this is collective energy management. So members of the energy club collectively produce, store, and share energy, typically from renewable energy sources. Yeah, so I'll wrap up there, just because we are 25 minutes behind. But if you just skip to the break slide, Reese. Yeah, fab.
Great. Thank you, Eve. And yes, sorry, thank you everyone for holding on. I started the chain of things running too late, but we are running a little behind. We promised you a 15-minute break, so let's take that 15-minute break and we can meet back here at 10 past. Appreciate that's 14 minutes now. I hope that's okay. So we meet back here at 10 past, go grab a coffee, come for a break, anything you need. And we will be doing a workshop. Eve will introduce a task and we'll have a bit of a discussion amongst ourselves. So less of us talking. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, hello again, everyone. It's now 10 past, so I hope you all managed to get a bit of a break, get caffeinated for those who need it. I think I did, to be honest, and I hope it's giving you a bit of energy for some participation in a bit of a workshop. So we're going to change the timings just a little bit because we're running behind. So we'll do 40 minutes on the workshop coming up, which Eve will take us through. So we're looking at defining some energy solutions for a hypothetical location, hypothetical community. Then we'll have the short break afterwards, and then the Q&A session for those who want to stay around and ask any specific questions. Wrapping up around midday for the workshop, and we'll have half an hour after that to go through questions. So, Eve, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, great. If Reese, you could put the slide to ahead. Okay, so in this workshop, we're going to be looking at options and opportunities available for the low carbon energy production, thinking about all the different technologies that we've touched on today. If we go to the next slide as well. So in this exercise, we're looking at a fictional energy island, and well, a fictional island itself to explore these low carbon technologies. And while there aren't exactly many islands in the northeast or Yorkshire, it's quite a good geographical concept when we're thinking about energy, as it kind of encourages that idea of self-sufficiency and generating and using energy locally. So on this fictional island, we're going to have, well, we have 100 homes and very limited energy infrastructure. There is a connection to the mainland for electricity, but oil is used for heating individual homes and businesses. So our goal in this workshop is to achieve net zero carbon emissions for both heating and electricity, and to try and make the island 100% energy sufficient. So I'd like everyone to think about what are the energy demands of the island, what's needed, where is it needed, when is the energy needed, what's locally appropriate, what resources are there, and we'll show a kind of physical map in the next slide, but thinking not just about the physical context, but also the social context and the political context, and what are the potential technologies, and also what challenges might there be in building this infrastructure. We didn't really discuss it in this presentation, but thinking about the kind of physical and social, environmental challenges that might come up. And also, what are the benefits? What can we, further than just decarbonisation, what other benefits could this situation provide? So just going on to the next slide, here's a visualization, what it's going to be. We'll go into breakout rooms, I believe.
I think with the number of people, we're probably okay to stay in one room.
In which case, we'll stay in one room. Great. So as you can see, we've got an island here. We've got a larger settlement with some kind of more industrial type buildings. We've got a smaller settlement. We've got a lot of natural resources. What energy infrastructure is suitable, first of all? Does anyone have any ideas or comments?
So we're looking to draw upon some of the information that you've heard about today, but also your own knowledge. Take a look at what's here. Maybe Eve, you could describe some of the resources, and please feel free to talk out loud. If you feel the need to put your hand up, please do, and we'll select you. But I'd quite like to be kind of an open conversation, so feel free.
Okay. Well, first of all, the main building with the clock.
Yeah.
That would look at probably solar paneling on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and the houses probably surrounding that could that mainly in the scale of things. Yeah, the whole island could have rooftop PV solar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the sort of variety of buildings as well there, that like bigger building, the domestic building, they'll be using electricity at different times perhaps. So that could also work.
Heat source pumps in there.
Yeah, to heat buildings.
Wind turbines on farming land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got quite a few ideas there. I think focusing on the building energy is really interesting. I think the solar PV is the go-to for many community organizations because it's an established technology, because it's relatively cheap, and because often communities have assets, community centers and so forth. So that maybe we haven't defined it, but that central large building could quite easily be a community center that you could put solar panels on. On your point about wind, wind's an interesting one in the UK in that there's not been a lot of wind turbine development recently. That's changing as the rules are relaxed around planning. But maybe it's a question that if you were to live on this island, would you be happy to see a wind turbine popping up on those fields? You know, is that a reasonable area for development?
George?
Just a suggestion, depending on how the nature of the industrial building or the factory there, the nature of it and how close it is to the other buildings, some excess heat could possibly be used for a heat network. Yeah.
So do you have any sense of what type of, you're allowed to define what these buildings become. You know, this is very open. So if this were your perfect industrial building, what would you like to see, George?
Oh, I don't know. Okay. Something that generates heat, but I don't know.
Sure. I mean,
I'd be interested to find out though.
Yeah, so something like, I mean, again, this is not something with a huge amount of experience with, but something like a steelworks, for instance. You have a huge amount of heat in that building. A lot of it wasted to the atmosphere inside and outside the building. As George mentions, maybe that could be captured. Maybe that could be used to provide heating, hot water, even generate electricity. There's definitely opportunities from the industrial process.
Yeah. We've got a bit of a queue open here. So Susan, do you want to come up first?
I was just going to ask about possibility of using the little lake or river for some hydro or a water source heat pump, but is a long way from the potential users. And the other thing I was just wondering is, because it's an island, could we be looking at using the energy in a sort of microgrid or local energy club, that kind of thing? So when we're not trying to export, obviously, externally, and we're just generating and using where it is. That was it.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Eve, go ahead. You were responding.
No, I was going to say those are both really good points, and I think that the river kind of being used as a heat pump, maybe that wouldn't be suitable for the really far away settlement on the other side of the island. But as you can see, there's some agriculture nearby that will be using energy. There are properties kind of where the ferry comes in, where the interconnector comes in. So maybe thinking about even more localized energy within the island there for kind of separate heat pumps, heat networks potentially could definitely be an idea.
To throw in a bit of a role-playing element to this, so we're going to talk about different technologies, and we can see the different spaces we might have. So we've had a turbine mentioned on a piece of farmland. We've had a hydroelectric on the river over there. If you were to be a resident on this island, maybe thinking from that perspective, what do you see as the main reasons you would or wouldn't want to do this? What would make you think, if someone turned up and said, I want to put a dam on this river on your island, what would you be concerned about? That kind of thing. So maybe just particularly for hydro, if anyone has any view on that.
We've got a few people in the queue there. I don't know if it's directly related to that question, but Mark, do you want to jump in there with your comment or question?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a really interesting workshop exercise, and I understand it's quite simplified and it's a very straightforward question, but I think we could do with knowing more about the current reality. It's an island, it's self-contained. Where does the island get its water from? Because that would link to, you know, like the opportunities around ground source heating, for example. I don't know whether the question about potentially doing something on the river is going to interfere with possibly agriculture and other things. But I think you can superimpose onto this exercise all sorts of like questions and assumptions, and there looks to be lots of livestock as well, and you know, are there opportunities for anaerobic digestion? But the fact that it's a self-contained island, I think, is quite an interesting sort of context to think about energy infrastructure. Thanks.
Yeah, Mark, I agree with your points. I think, you know, we can't give you the whole context on the island because to some extent we're making it up. But I think to a very large extent we're making it up. But the point is that these questions are really important, and that this is what is to some extent that we're kind of introducing the feasibility process. So this is our it might be an island, it might be a community, but it still has a designated kind of boundary to the edge of it, whether you choose a parish council area or so.
Your island, you've looked
and the point is, if you were to come up with an idea, as we already have, you need to start asking those questions. So the questions you've rightly answered about what impact does, say, damming that river have on agriculture, on water supply, that sort of thing, on environment and ecology. These are the questions we test at the feasibility stage, and to some extent we want to dig into that today. And you know, whilst we think, okay, great, here's some technology ideas, we also want to talk about what the limitations might be, whether it's, are they technically viable, or whether it's, are there too many constraints to make it viable?
Yeah, and I think the kind of simplicity of this exercise has been designed so that you ask those questions, because those are questions that are going to come up whether you're on an island or not. Raymond, you're next in the queue.
It was really noticing the interconnector to the mainland, which I assume is electric, and the little icons of waves all the way around the island. I'm not sure how well developed wave power is, but obviously you have a big area around the island which could be developed, and if you had surplus power, then you've got the interconnector to the mainland. So I think if you were presented with this as somebody's got £300 million and wants to invest in something, then there's a whole range of options which range from just making the islands self-sufficient to actually providing a major source of electricity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
To feed into wherever it's connected to at the other end.
Yeah, and this raises a really important constraint, which I hope that someone would bring up, which is the national grid constraint. Sorry, the electricity grid constraint. So when we're thinking about connecting that kind of surplus electricity and selling it back to the grid isn't always in the position to connect to whatever infrastructure that you're building. So this could be an amazing, as we say, or as you say, income to the island. But it also might require the grid itself to do upgrades so that you can connect, so that that connection is enabled. There's also the kind of the point about electricity generation and use on site versus exporting. So generally, use on site is a better financial outcome than selling back to the grid, because you sell it back to the grid at a much lower rate than what you buy it. So by buying it, you're saving quite a lot of money, but by selling it back, you're kind of making much less. So that kind of grid connection can be incredibly helpful. but it's not always possible, and that's where we have to kind of then think about storage options. So yeah, it's raised a really interesting point. Does anyone else have any comments about that? Andrew? Andrew?
Yeah, this island is very similar to Tenerife, really, where I worked on the wind farm from sea-based wind turbines. So on the north side of the island there, where the three waves are, that would be ideal, but the infrastructure costs would be immense. Just basically, you know, you've got the farmland here. Yeah, is that open? Is it open farmland?
It can be.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying there, fencing and you know, disturbance of soil, yeah, will be taken into consideration as to chemical-free farming. You know, which would be, like we discussed before, the is it manure fuel prospects of storing something like that. That could happen there. Again, the river water area is quite a way to service the houses on the left-hand side of it. So really, you're looking more or less at this community, very high installation costs of what they could achieve. So I would be possibly do this in stages.
Yeah.
So then looking at wind farming and so forth, you know, over a period of what, 10 years, I think, really.
Yeah. That's a really good
25 years in Tenerife.
I think you raise a good point, Andrew, that is very specific to islands, but is a general constraint on projects around things like costs. So for islands, the cost uplift, so that the cost of developing an island can be quite high because you have to transport materials there, get the labour there, have the labour on site, that sort of thing. Whilst that's less of a concern on the UK mainland, understanding cost is potentially quite challenging, depending on the nature of the project. So if we're putting a solar panel up, it's okay. We generally can understand how much a solar panel can cost. We can get quotations on that quite easily. If we're thinking more innovatively about things that are more challenging for a community to undertake, so heat networks or anaerobic digestion, the costs can be quite hard to ascertain, and then they're always changing. So understanding the costs, you know, throughout the development process can be quite a constraint on development, effectively.
Okay.
Ian, you have your hand up.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I just wonder if we could take it back a few steps. Looking at the diagram, that could be any community. It could be your parish, your ward, your town. But just taking it right back to the beginning, as a novice in our working group, is a working group. It's not even a business structure yet. Hopefully that will come not in a too distant future. But okay, you're looking at your area, you see opportunities. At what point, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg that I can't clear in my own head, presumably you're going to have to discuss this. The first thing is discuss it with your community, and then if they sort of give it the thumbs up and go ahead with it, generally a good idea, they agree with it, do you then somehow do a feasibility study, maybe apply for grants so you can get this feasibility study so that you can take it forward? So rather than just looking at the island or the place that you live and saying, yeah, there's an opportunity here, we can see the sun, solar panels, there's waves, tidal, so that aspect I think is reasonably straightforward, identifying opportunities. But how do you start a project off in the first place? What comes first? What steps do you have to do to get this thing actually moving?
Sure. You're jumping ahead to tomorrow's presentation.
Oh, sorry. Well,
no, don't worry. It's a really important question, and you're right. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg.
Yeah, I am coming to that one. So if you want to leave it till tomorrow, then that's absolutely fine.
I can answer in brief because I find this quite interesting. I think that there's a, as you say, in an ideal world, you ask the community what you want to do, but community engagement takes resource. It costs money effectively. It also takes quite a lot of time, and without the right information, most people aren't able to really take a decision on whether they want a wind turbine or whether they want solar panel, that sort of thing. So I would stray away from looking at the technology process. Obviously, this opportunity identification that we're doing right now is really important, but it's more about focusing on the impacts. So or maybe the problem definition. So what are the issues we're trying to address? Are we trying to reduce carbon emissions in our area or community? Are we trying to address fuel poverty? Are we trying to, just reduce energy bills? It doesn't have to be fuel poverty. Are we trying to secure the long-term future of a community building, say? All those things that you might be trying to do. There's people you can talk to and ask their views on, but there's no reason to select one technology to achieve this. You just need to define the problems and then do an options appraisal. So you could apply for funding to say, we want to address these issues. These are the technologies we think might work. We'd like to investigate this further with funding.
Yeah, I mean,
so I think it's a reframing, really.
Yeah, Sandra, this is very much what I do with companies, is outline the scope of see what they're responsible for, what will make them more efficient on scope 2, and then basically quote and see where the what's realistic in the feasibility and going forward. Initially on the side of usually is determined by cost and what funds are available. That's the first question that people say is, what funds are available? Because they would need to know where it is first before they can contemplate on deciding on what technology is implemented into their business, or in this case, to the island as a community. So, somebody has to do a feasibility report, and outline the costs, and then they can understand where they start and where they finish.
So something to discuss in more depth tomorrow, I think.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
Thank you for your input, Andrew. It's really useful.
Thank you.
So a couple of things in chat. I noticed, Leanne, you mentioned wind on the mountains and an electric boat. Do you want to expand at all?
It was just something I thought of. If you pop the turbines up there, you're more likely to get sort of more wind.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I agree with the tidal idea as well. Looks like there could be some real possibilities with that. If talking about uses, say like if the boat was actually something that charged on the mainland or charged on the island, and it was electric as well, you're cutting out sort of fossil fuels as well on that.
Yeah,
and I think that brings up a really important point, which is like renewable transport as well. So, which is maybe more applicable to northeastern Yorkshire as kind of EV charging infrastructure, buses, maybe electric bikes or non-electric bikes that people can rent, which a lot of community groups as well can have a big impact on. We've worked with communities which have set up community bus schemes, which kind of either have set routes or request routes. So they encourage people to not use their individual vehicle, and it enables kind of active travel. Something else that community groups look at that isn't necessarily energy related is kind of active travel infrastructure, because that still reduces the number of individual journeys being taken. So yeah, that's really good to bring up and definitely something to talk about. Something I also noticed in the chat was on the energy efficiency of buildings, which I think, Mark, you brought up. I don't know if you had a comment specifically on that, but this is, yeah, crucial.
It's just about understanding the current reality. I appreciate it's a workshop exercise, but what is the current demand? How efficient are the buildings? And my other observation is how dispersed the population is, and that's going to affect, you know, the type of infrastructure.
Yeah, so relating this to kind of any community that any of you might be in, when we're looking at the energy efficiency of buildings, there's a sort of desk-based way to do this, which is getting the EPC energy performance certificates, which a lot of properties have, which kind of gives you an idea of the fabric of the building, whether it has insulation or double glazing, and when that might be fitted. And the other way to understand the energy efficiency of buildings in your area would be to actually go out and either talk to people or survey their houses. So some communities that we work with opt for a kind of survey that people can optionally complete. That gives them an idea of like, what is the current state, how much work needs to be done, or has everyone been proactive and put in double glazing? That's usually not the case. But those are the kind of approaches that community groups have taken, and I would agree that it is kind of like a crucial initial step when you're looking at energy demand, because as I mentioned before, can we increase overall energy demand? So it's a good point to bring up as well.
It's also, just to again segue into my presentation tomorrow, but around the project development process, is understanding the current situation is critical. So any study you might do, feasibility or otherwise, is going to look at the baseline, as we call it, so the current condition. So that is, how is energy used? Where is energy used? What time is energy used? And that's across electricity and heat. What's the current state of the buildings within the study, whether that's houses across a parish council area or particular buildings within a particular site. And understanding all of that gives you the baseline to compare against. So if we are to put solar panels on, what's the relative benefit? You know, how much energy are we now saving? What is our energy bill saving? What is our carbon emissions reduction? So there's a kind of a part of every energy study or energy feasibility that is pretty consistent, which is understanding these questions that you're referring to, Mark.
Yeah. And just to address your second point, which is on the dispersed population, this is, again, something really crucial when you're thinking about the type of technology that your community is suited to. If you're working with quite a rural community where a heat network would work, and the network costs and distributions, the distances aren't that far, then that's going to be much more efficient than if you have lots of individual properties where actually maybe an individual heat pump, whether that be air source or otherwise, is more suitable. Or if you're looking at like individual generation of properties, or a more centralized kind of solution where you can benefit from those like economies of scale and energy efficiency improvements. Susan, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, it was just in relation to Mark's comment about the fabric first approach. There was an interesting comment yesterday about, in relation to that, you know, by insulating and reducing energy use, then you need to generate less energy, so that potentially is cheaper approach. But then there's a group we've been approached by, and they are looking at fabric first approach, but the cost of the retrofit for energy efficiency was just too expensive, so they've slightly switched it round. They're going for the renewable generation first, but the plan is to set up the sort of business model of it, that income generated from that through a little district heat network then goes into a pot, which will then retrofit the buildings to then save the energy. So they're doing it the other way around, which was just to throw that in as quite an interesting approach to reducing energy and generating. So that's it, really.
And did this group find it easier to find funding for the generation technology then?
They're in the process of making applications, but my understanding is because of the type of sort of district heat network they're looking at, they have potentially got an energy supplier interested in investing in the installation of it.
Okay.
So, but I don't know the detail of that, but I'm very interested to find out more and how that model works, because that might well be applicable for other groups as well.
Definitely, and again, that links to one of the later workshops. I'm not sure which one, Sandy 3 or 4, on kind of funding mechanisms and governance mechanisms.
Number 3, yeah.
Number 3. Yeah. Mark.
It's just a very quick observation. We've had a really good energy audit done, which has meant that we've then been able to apply for funds. But what we've found is that when it comes to applying for the funds for the infrastructure, we're required to tackle all of the fabric first stuff. So funders will not look at the more interesting renewable stuff until we've done the fabric first. Now, that's not going to be the case with all funders, but I just think it's an important point to clock when you're assessing where to go for funds and investment. Cheers.
Yeah, agreed. So I think it was, I'm sorry, I forgot who mentioned it earlier, but there's this kind of thing of finding the perfect project for yourselves, or the project you think will have the most impact, and then actually getting funding for a project. And there may be particular funds for energy efficiency works, or there may be funds that require that energy efficient work to happen first. There may be funds for low carbon transport. You know, in fact, there are funds across all these different technologies and areas. And yeah, understanding what's available and the criteria and how it suits your project is really important. And you know, we're not suggesting purely chasing grant funds, because that's not the best means of going about things, but it is a bit of a reality if you want to fund an energy project. Is fitting with what's available. Andrew.
Yeah, on that point, prior to Brexit and stuff, yeah, the European funding was easy to get. So, you know, it seems, I feel, I work with the Tees Valley, SMEs, that was great fun, and BEEP funding was good when we were not in Brexit. But since then, there's been very little for micro businesses right the way through, not only on community. And I just find it very frustrating for businesses that want to, not only businesses, but community centres and stuff. But Northern Power Grid are very, very good. Have been very good at in certain areas. That's come to an end. But since the European funding has disappeared, it's just absolutely queues and queues of organisations like BEEP in County Durham, and now Tees Valley's got a small one. It just seems to have drained, and I think, you know, they don't. Energy efficiency is at 1.5, and it'll go up and up and up with these micro businesses, which represent 80%, yeah, or micro communities even, yeah, just can't access the funding. Well, that's what the real problem is, because of the cost, right, to do this.
Yeah, the funding has been few and far between in certain areas, especially energy efficiency. Sadly, I have no solution for you on that, but we did mention earlier that we're hopeful of more supportive mechanisms for community-led energy.
Yeah, but what is quite annoying with community, that is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. I mean, these people have. Why can't you just put it all into one stage and complete the process? Yeah, more rapidly, because we're running out of time. You won't get things done by the year 2030 if you keep on going through stage after stage after stage. That's my probably I'm speaking out of turn, but this is what puts off a lot. I mean, there's farming funding, rural funding for farming. A lot of farmers have paid it for paying it themselves. They can't wait for it because of the stage levels. So I've got 4 farms, yeah, but it's now got solar. They had to pay for it themselves because of the funding, the complexity was beyond them, and they wasn't going to pay somebody to do it for them. So you know, this is a lot of, if you like, paperwork, documentation. Yeah, it has to be more simplified for everyday people that for instance, run farms. Yeah, and you know what time they're up in the morning. They don't want, the last thing they want to be doing is doing application after application. So I think that should be addressed.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, a bit outside of remit maybe, but I do agree that there's a lot of paperwork involved in these sorts of things. I think on the community front, the Community Energy Fund is a relatively straightforward process application-wise. Obviously, there's a requirement for a reasonable amount of groundwork, but again, it's something that SEEN or the Net Zero Hub is able to support on. Unfortunately, I don't have any specialism in farming, so yeah, I couldn't comment on that. Just to throw one slight, oh sorry, Sue.
I was just going to say, no, that's where, the hub, and we are available to hopefully support people through the application process. And, all of, as you say, funding is complex and all the different funds have different requirements, depending on the aims and objectives, but also, the local authorities, the business growth and support teams are always a good starting point for directing, smaller businesses to available funding, things like the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which I understand is now coming to its end, funds like that. So, local authorities, the business support, or the net zero hubs are always good places to start, and hopefully they might also be able to point you in and community groups in the direction of other support groups available, such as community foundations, who are very practiced in helping groups, advising on applications and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, hopefully, if you connect with the right people, they will point you in the direction of others who can then give you the correct support.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, so we maybe have not exhausted our opportunities on this energy island, but I think we've done a reasonable amount of discussion here. I wanted to, just before we move on to a couple of questions for everyone to consider, is give a kind of real world example. Again, I appreciate islands is quite a specific concept, but it does apply to any community of place. The island of Samso, so I'm moving outside of the UK. This is Denmark. Is a small island just off Denmark. It has all the things we're looking at here, from farmland to forest to a ferry and an interconnector. It's a very constrained island in terms of the energy networks, so they don't have a huge amount of capacity to import and export. They just take the power they could get from the mainland, and generation on the island was quite constrained. I think it was back in 2007, so this is a very long-running thing. And it's, for some of the room, you may have heard this as a case study before because it's quite famous. But the local authority, effectively, of the island started developing a plan for a 100% renewable island. That started with some wind turbines, which are community-owned or co-owned by the local authority and community members to generate electricity on the island. Some of that was exported up to the limit they could, but they needed to use as much on the island as possible. They then implemented district heating for huge amounts of the domestic and non-domestic properties on the island. That was using biomass. So they started using some of the trees on the island to generate heat. Alongside that, they started a forestry program to make sure they would continue to have trees to produce heat. They're also looking at things like heat pumps now as well to try and diversify that heat load a bit. They've got quite advanced heating systems. They've got very advanced electrical systems now that are kind of active management of the wind turbines, and they are a net exporter of energy. Therefore, they are not entirely fossil fuel free, but they are very close to being 100% renewables. They're working on electric vehicle across the island, so there's a kind of continued push to make everything on the island as kind of environmental and as low carbon as possible. It's a really interesting project. It's worth looking up, and it's something that islands in the UK have tried to implement, and elements of they've tried to implement. So we've worked with, say, the Isle of Mull and Iona off Scotland on similar kind of renewable energy plans. The islands of Egg and Canna, which are off-grid, again in Scotland, have looked at something similar. And in Orkney, they have an active network management system, which is trying to maximize the amount of wind energy they can use on the island. So that's kind of replication of what's happened elsewhere. And I think these sort of case studies are really interesting because they allow you to see what's possible, you know, the level of ambition that others have gone to, and then how to potentially emulate that within your community, within your local area. Is there any other questions or comments on this energy island? Anything that you think is worth bringing up apart from the hydrogen tractors, George? I saw that in the chat. I have to say, I've never come across electric or hydrogen tractors, but it is an interesting concept. Any other comments? I see no hands raised. Okay, I think Eve, you have a few more questions to ask people.
Yeah. So if we just move on to the kind of last slide here, and we've just got a few questions to reflect upon. So this kind of draws on some of the questions that were asked through here. But firstly, what are the key considerations when choosing what low carbon technology you want to use in your community? What are kind of the overriding things? Does anyone have any ideas or suggestions? Yeah, Mark.
I think there's something about understanding the current reality of what the energy demands are and when energy is needed, because that can just inform those choices. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'd say like the key thing here that I see is what do the community need and when do they need it? What is the demand? And the second part of that question, the second answer I would say is what resources are available? What is the environment like? What can you possibly do and what can you possibly not do? And then trying to match up that, what do the community need and what can you provide? That's where we come up with the beginning of a solution. Question 2 here. Okay, yeah, George. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just thinking like, I mean, maybe this is kind of coming on to the later questions, but like what's the like cultural context for the community as well? So like we mentioned, you know, using the river for hydro or mountains for wind, but if those are really important leisure facilities for the community, then probably not a good idea to go and dig it up. And that's, I guess that's one of the, you know, great things about community energy is that they're in touch with those, that kind of cultural context and therefore probably make decisions informed by the community.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. That does sort of lead on to like question 2, what are the most significant barriers? Looking at like the social context, the historical, there might be some kind of like cultural designation of the area. There might be protected species. That's all really, really important when you're choosing these technologies and designing them. But can anyone else give me any other significant barriers that we might have discussed today? Yeah, Susan.
Just, you know, people, time, energy, resources, you know, confidence, knowledge, that kind of thing are real barriers in certain areas to communities developing developing community energy ideas, which is actually just slightly to throw in there. I'd be really interested, you know, as part of the the governance and procurement modelling is sort of looking at those potential sort of shared ownership type projects and potential community energy developer models, and how that might in effect support communities potentially to deliver more community energy with community benefit. But yeah, that's I'd find that one.
Yeah, definitely. And that's right on, Sandy.
I was just going to say that's a huge one, and it's something that funding streams haven't really paid attention to in previous iterations. Is the time and effort on the part of the community entity or the people within that community to take on these projects. Having worked in the sector for quite a long time, it's very, very impressive the amount people commit in terms of volunteer time to make these projects happen. But it's also equally frustrating that that's not recognised as part of the cost of a community energy project. So as a consultant, we will go in and quote to provide a feasibility study. And that was the cost that was allowable under previous funding streams. Within the Community Energy Fund, there is allowance for the costs of the community themselves. So whether that's project management time, whether that's conducting a community survey or an engagement event, the things where communities are really, or community representatives or members are really suited to, there is the ability to cost that into your proposal, which I think is really important because, you know, people take time away from work, take time away from family and things like that to make these projects happen, and should be fairly reimbursed for it. Mark.
I just want to support what you've just said, Sandy. Just very briefly, I always work in a voluntary capacity. I'm director of a community benefit society, which has just got full planning permission to develop a 2 megawatt community solar meadow. And it's been 4 years in the making. The amount of volunteer effort that's gone in. But because that particular project required planning permission and the planning process is so adversarial, it really divided the community. And so, you know, making sufficient provision for the community engagement side of things from an early stage is quite important, and the communication side of things, because if you're not really clear about what the options are and the choices, and you don't involve people in a meaningful way, it can really slow things down. And my experience of numerous projects of this type is that it requires people to be patient, and it's not easy being patient when you've got a vision and you're wanting to make a difference. But the whole sort of process, whether it's planning or feasibility or applying for grants, it all takes time. So I think setting and managing people's expectations is quite important as well, just in terms of my lived experience. Thanks.
Yep, I entirely concur there, Mark. It's a long game, and involving the community at the very first step is critical. You know, that's one of these significant barriers, because if you don't do it, you turn up with a fully formed idea and people ask, why wasn't I allowed to input? You know, why couldn't I participate in this? This is about you, not me. And similarly, you don't want people seeing a planning application and assuming this is some developer-led, you know, solar array or wind turbine that is going to benefit someone else, not us. Being clear about who you're aiming to benefit, and also including people in the decision-making process is a critical part of community energy.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on barriers or things that might constrain community development? Victoria.
Just a quick note about sort of future-proofing. I think we're going to get a lot more houses built in the next sort of 5 to 10 years with the current government, and it's making sure that what you've got in place now is obviously suitable for community, but also can it adapt to any increased capacity that some communities might see coming sooner. So I guess that would be a key consideration that I just wanted to bring up.
So how do you see that fitting in with a community-led energy or community-led low carbon projects?
I don't know. It was just something that I thought would should be considered really. I was thinking about the whole kind of development of sort of rural areas and communities, like a bit like your point, your communities like they're being done to rather than done with. And it just got me thinking about that sort of future proofing for that large capacity when required. So I don't have...
Okay, yeah, I think that's really, really useful. It's something that the energy networks really have to pay attention to. But also within our energy studies, we look at this as well, about future energy demand. So it's all well and good producing an energy solution that solves a problem for right now. But what about, you know, the village or town you're looking at in 10 years' time, when there's 100 new houses somewhere nearby, or there's greater grid constraints, or the climate's changed? You know, that's genuinely a part of planning out many energy projects. So, for instance, if you're looking at heating for houses, how does the energy load change in a climate that's hotter in summer and there's more storms in winter, that kind of thing? Obviously, this gets very assumptive in the process because it's really hard to predict exactly what's going to happen, but we know the general trends. So I think your point about what happens in future is really quite important, especially if we're talking about developing projects that, as Mark has mentioned, might take 4, 5, 6 years. Trying to plan for that future is an important consideration.
Mark, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, it's just to support Victoria's point. I mean, Community First Yorkshire is the rural community council for Yorkshire, and there are similar organisations in other parts of the northeastern Yorkshire. And one of my hopes in terms of, you know, the current government, when it's talking about the importance of growth and renewable energy and everything else, is this concept of future proofing. And it would be great to see a greater emphasis being placed and investment on neighbourhood planning, because those localities that have community plans and have neighbourhood plans, I think, are almost like more sort of ready to and able to engage with this, because they've already thought about the future needs of their communities. And you know, the energy sort of use generation is going to be part of that. But how you zone land and how you sort of design for shade and how you design for biodiversity and people and flooding and everything else needs to be considered alongside the energy side of things. Just very briefly, the 10-acre site that we're developing as a community meadow, we originally had it zoned within the local plan for a green business park and for self-build homes, but that couldn't stack up financially, and so in terms of our engagement with the local community and, you know, looking at the current reality and what was likely to happen with climate change, that's why we switched over to the solar meadow idea. And we were fortunate that we were sufficiently sort of flexible. We kept the land derelict and managed for biodiversity. But I fully agree, Victoria, we need to be future-proofing where we can. Cheers.
Thanks, Mark.
Great. So,
okay. Go ahead, Eve.
Right, yeah. Just moving on to the final question now, and maybe thinking about the specific projects or areas that you're working with. Does anyone have any comments on which of these low carbon technologies you think are most suited to community energy, and why? No.
Okay. In my experience, and I've visited a lot of projects now, the ones that are very visual and have like quite a simple yet compelling story are powerful. So the the two community energy schemes that you featured in some detail in the southwest of England, I think that really helps to sort of inspire people, but it's also really quite accessible. Things like solar panels, photovoltaic arrays, and even the heat pumps and battery storage. And I've been to look at a lot of different variations on that in both Lancashire and Yorkshire, and they seem to be the ones that have made the greatest difference and have almost had like an immediate result. And a lot of the groups that I visited have been able to have an energy audit. They've then been able to find local contractors who've been able to help them to access the technical know-how, and then they've gone on to the procurement and the implementation stage, and it's been relatively quick compared to the solar meadow, which is a much longer term thing. So I think ones that generate, a quick return in terms of achieving and being successful, but also that achieve a financial return and are relatively straightforward to invest. Things like ground source heat pumps and other things just sound quite technically challenging for community energy projects in my limited experience of those. Thanks.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting point there, Mark, and this is something that we've dealt with a lot of communities through the Rural Community Energy Fund. When you're talking about things like communal heating, so larger scales of developments, quite big infrastructural projects like heat networks, there is a precedent. There's a project that's often cited called Swaffham Prior down in Cambridgeshire, which is originally community-led, but was taken on by Cambridgeshire County Council and is providing heat to homes using boreholes, so ground source heat pumps and boreholes. It's a success that has spawned a lot of interest and a lot of attempts to replicate, most of which have not moved past the kind of detailed feasibility stage. And the reason for that is there's a specific set of conditions which supported that project. They had access to the right subsidy at the right time. They had, started at a time when subsidy was available and they could generate the support and the sign up for the project to get it in place. That was the renewable heat incentive. And similarly, they also benefit from a nearby solar farm, which the county council owns and supplies some electricity from. So it's a very specific local solution. Trying to replicate that somewhere else is actually quite a challenge without the subsidy, without the supporting energy infrastructure, and often without the supportive governance, so without the support from the county council of the area. So we've tried to do this in a few places, and the projects nearly stack up, but they just don't quite have the right conditions to do it. And I'm sure Mark would tell you that, the prospects for the solar farm probably have changed dramatically over the last few years as energy prices change and your ability to secure different tariffs for your energy export. It kind of adapts over the course of the project. So this is not to say don't pursue a certain technology, but it's to say that the conditions for different technologies are continually changing. And it can be quite hard to pin down the more complex ones, like large-scale heating infrastructure, whereas simpler ones such as solar or individualized heat pumps or energy efficiency are a little easier to handle because they don't have so many variable inputs effectively. Sue.
Yeah, just to echo what you're saying, really, that we tend to see more inquiries or applications for solar with batteries than other types of technologies. But I think there does seem to be more interest in developing little local heat networks amongst community energy groups. But I think those tend to be maybe the more well-established community energy groups who maybe have some sort of staffing type support side of things, or maybe done solar or battery already. and yes, and there's quite a lot of EV linked EV charging, linked to solar, and Northumberland, Community Action Northumberland, which you're probably aware of, have developed a community energy cooperative, which is basically looking at the feasibility right through to installation of solar with batteries on 100 village halls across the whole of Northumberland in 5 years. So, you know, there are hopefully models there that are community groups are now taking forward, and so they're testing the lessons learned, etc., which then others can look at and think, well, which of those is maybe best suited to our situation, and we can follow that type of thing. Yeah, so that was it really.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I agree. One of the things maybe we don't mention here is what are the opportunities related to community energy. And one of them is about having these supportive networks of those working in the locality within the region that you can lean upon and learn from. Highlight Community Energy England as a really useful resource. They have guides on developing community energy projects, as well as case studies and so forth, which should kind of provide the inspiration for many projects. Okay, can everyone still hear me? You've frozen on my screen, so I'm just making sure you can.
Sorry, yeah, we can. We're good.
Okay. I think we've gone through a few of the barriers, a few of the technology suitabilities that I think are worth talking through. Obviously, these are topics you could talk about for a very long time. I suggest, just looking at the time, that we move on to our next break, and then there's kind of optional Q&A towards the end. Appreciate that it's quite a long morning of information, densely packed information to begin with. Sue's been sharing lots of information in the chat, just so you're aware, around the Community Energy Fund and also local projects. Thanks very much for doing so. I suggest we take 10 minutes now, so coming back about 22 minutes past. And if anyone wants to hang on and discuss anything they've got on their mind, whether that's a particular project idea or just some questions about what we've presented today, we'll be hanging around until 1 o'clock.
Sandy.
Yes, Andrew.
I'm afraid I can't make tomorrow because we've got another big meeting to go to. I did put in the chat there that if somebody could forward a link to Michael at tlr-uk.org, he's got a community project with in the Teesside area. He probably find this very interesting.
Okay, brilliant. Yes, very happy to do that. Reese, if you could just make a note of that. And yeah, thanks for coming along today, Andrew.
All right, but that's great. Susan, I'll be in touch with you shortly.
Brilliant, that's great. Yeah, it'd be good to hear about the Teesside project.
Yeah, that's Michael. He'll. That's what we'd like to discuss with you. Okay.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Appreciate
Brilliant,
your
thanks.
time.
So,
very interesting and very enjoyable. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So we'll be online in 10 minutes time. Well, 9 minutes time. If anyone's got any particular questions they want to work through, anything they want to talk about, please stay online. Thanks. Hello again, everyone. Just hit 22 minutes past, so I think that's been about 10 minutes. As I mentioned, this is all about a little Q&A. It's for you, basically, to ask us any questions you have, to talk through any concepts or ideas you want to pursue, to get our expert input on anything particular, or even just have a bit of a discussion about something you're interested in. I think we have, I can see Mark, Victoria, Leanne and Raymond still in the room, who aren't part of SEEN or the Net Zero Hub. Basically, the floor is yours. If you want to come forward with something to say, please go ahead, and we can discuss. Raymond.
Oh, hi. It may not be the right seminar to ask this, but I may not be in any of the others, so I'm going to ask it anyway.
No, go ahead.
As you heard, we're in the process of setting up our community energy organisation. We've been trying to decide on what the legal form should be. As far as I can tell, almost all of them are of the form of community benefit societies.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is whether we should look to a charitable status, for example, company limited by guarantee, or some other form. For me, the easy answer is, well, if everybody else is going for CBS form, then presumably that's regarded as the appropriate form. But I just wondered if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, this depends a little on what you're seeking to undertake, really. But you're right in saying that Community Benefit Society is the kind of go-to at the moment in terms of a form for communities, particularly communities undertaking energy projects. Historically, they were kind of cooperatives were very utilized early in the earlier years of energy development. There are kind of other options around, the community land trusts have taken on projects, that sort of thing. But typically, community interest companies, community benefit societies of any form are really what people go for. I'd need to know a little bit more about your project, I think, to fully understand what you want to do. The charitable status part of it can be a bit of an undertaking sometimes to get charitable status. It depends on your timescales and, again, what you want to achieve. What I would say is that whilst you could set up as a CBS, as a community benefit society, there are options to have related organizations. So, for instance, you might have a community charity as the kind of ultimate distributor, dispersing, say, grant funding and that kind of thing within the community, but they maybe take project revenues from an energy project from a different entity. For example, you can set up a special purpose vehicle, SPV, which would be the owner of a solar farm or a wind turbine or something like that. That allows them to operate in a kind of typical commercial fashion. It might just be a limited company. It also allows them to work in partnership with, say, developers, that kind of thing. And then from there, the money can be passed through effectively to whether it's a charity or the CBS or so forth to then use for community benefit. So there's quite a lot of options, and you can go as complex as you want with it, but I'd say generally, without knowing too much, that CBS is what most people are doing at the moment. Mark, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that being the form you've taken.
Yeah, Sandy, I'd support what you're saying. It's very context specific, and in my experience, going to your rural community council or your local CVS can be a good starting point. But what I found, I volunteer for a community benefit society, and then I'm also a director of a community benefit society, which is specifically about community energy. And I found Cooperatives UK to be extremely helpful. They have some great resources on their site, and they have like a bank of advisors as well. So yeah, I wouldn't rush it. I'd have a conversation with someone who is like quite local, and take it from there. But all of the things that you've mentioned, Sandy, you know, the context, the local considerations in relation to the nature of your project, how much energy you've got, what your how much community energy you've got in terms of people power, and time is quite important. But I do agree that going down the charitable route can be quite time consuming and can take a lot longer than anybody would like it to. Thank you.
See.
Yeah, just to add into that, you know, if to take the opportunity, if they're locally available, or to talk to other groups who've been through that setup process, and to find out what their pros and cons were and lessons learned, you know, particularly if you could find a group that's looking or has maybe tried to achieve the same types of project or aims as yourselves, and have a chat with them to see, you know, what they found and why they went in the direction they did. That's always useful. And that's something that we at the hub can potentially link you up to other groups that may be a bit further down the line.
Yeah, thanks all of you. I guess one of the issues is it's not really what project we're trying to deliver, but we've got to start off with something, and that something will probably be relatively small and unambitious. The hope would be that the whole thing develops and becomes more ambitious with more substantial projects, and whether the organization, the form of the organization can evolve as well, or it may not need to. I mean, if it's a CBS, it may well be that works, irrespective of the scale and ambition.
Yeah, I think what I wouldn't do is think too far ahead into the future on exactly what you're going to need. Working with something that's quite straightforward and low cost to set up right now is a good idea, because there's nothing stopping you from altering or adding the number of organizations or changing the nature of the organization depending on what you identify as a good opportunity. Yeah, I'm just posting, you may have already seen this to be honest, but Community Energy England's guide on operating a community business. There is in there the links to Cooperatives UK and some other links that are useful. Some of it's a bit kind of adjacent rather than being just about setting up a particular model, but it is a useful resource.
Thank you.
Victoria, go ahead.
Can I just clarify my understanding of the current fund? Is that appropriate? Would you be able to advise on that? For the Community Energy Fund, you mean? Yeah. Yes, Sue may be better placed than I, but I can cover some of it. You mentioned today that it's kind of like a sort of a two-phase approach, from the first phase being the sort of 40k for a feasibility study, and then a further possibly up to 100k progress that. But I'm guessing that second phase isn't applicable now because the fund closes in March 2025, and we also wouldn't be at that stage then. Is that correct?
Should I take that one? Yes. If you need to have done the feasibility stage of your project, which is stage 1 feasibility stage, before you could apply for the stage 2 development funding, which develops much more, the detailed project development costs. Now you could, if you've already done feasibility study that's not right, okay, in that case you can't go straight to stage 2. And I think you're right, you are now running out of time, and there's not a further round planned. However, I would say don't let that stop you going potentially for the feasibility, because once you've got that in hand, there's been other pots of funding. There's been the VCSE pot which funded energy audits, and then it funded capital work, but you had to have had that energy audit from either themselves or elsewhere. So I would say don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you can't apply for stage 1 and stage 2 for the same project at the same time, because obviously there's a timing thing there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
I'd add to this, Victoria, that stage 1 and 2 is a way that the Rural Community Energy Fund and the Community Energy Fund look at energy projects. From a consultant's perspective, stage 2 is not always necessary, or at least it's wrapped up in other parts of funding. So it's completely viable to undertake a stage 1 feasibility study and then progress certain elements with pots of funding, or even to progress straight to not quite financial close, but getting investment in place. It's just totally dependent on the type of project, but a feasibility study and a robust feasibility study is often enough to get you to the stage of getting some investment in the door to tick off the last pieces of the detailed project development, whether that's the procurement stage or the final designs, that kind of thing, and then implement. Yeah, if you have any idea of what projects you're talking about, we might be able to advise further.
Well, we're actually looking at something similar to what was mentioned in Northumberland, but we've not even begun a feasibility study yet, so we are at the very, very early stages. But yeah, no, I appreciate it's still useful to do. I just want to clarify that, yeah, that we wouldn't be able to apply for the second bit of funding as well. But thank you, that's really helpful.
Sure.
Just to add to what Sandy said there, some funders, people I've heard of that people have just applied straight, in effect. They haven't had feasibility. They haven't really undertaken detailed feasibility to cover the range that we would be looking at through the Community Energy Fund. But they've in effect applied for a package for the whole project sort of in one go. But as Sandy said, it entirely depends on those funders. So they put in for the whole thing. Some funders may cover the whole thing in one go, but it's very funding dependent. I have been speaking to your colleague Carol Roberts about so hopefully we have a further conversation about the potential community First Yorkshire bid.
Super, thank you. Yeah, Carol's looped me in with all this, and we've got a meeting with NICRA, is that how you pronounce it? NICRE tomorrow. So yeah.
Excellent. It's really good you mentioned them, because NICRA, the National Innovation Centre for Rural Enterprise, which is based at Newcastle University, they can work with community energy or community groups to do quite a lot of community engagement side of things, and they sometimes have pots of funding for it. So if you're looking at engagement side, I can potentially point people in that direction as well.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from the room? I see shakes of the head. Sorry, that's my daughter in the background. Fine. Well, I think if we don't have any other questions, I think we can wrap up the question and answer session. My email is on the screen there, so please feel free to email me. Sorry, I realise we've had questions from Raymond, Victoria. Leanne, did you have anything you wanted to mention?
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I should have said. I was just quite interested in listening to what people were saying. I've been learning quite a lot from people's experience. Obviously, I'm not associated with the project at the moment, but I've been talking to lots of people. So anything I've learned today has been really useful. I've taken lots of notes and got a lot of the links from the messages. So I just want to say thanks to everybody for sharing their experiences, and hopefully this will all come in handy. I can pass that on to other people in the future.
Great, thanks, Leanne. Yeah, I hope it does come in handy. I hope that the information is useful to everyone. So what I was saying as well was that please feel free to email me directly. I will get back to you if there's anything you want to discuss or anything you want to investigate. I'm very happy to have a chat. I should have really put Susan's email address up on here as well, but we've got the Northeast Hub links in the chat, as well as the inquiries email at the Northeast Hub. We will share the presentations once the workshop series is complete. So we'll give everyone all of the presentations as PDFs, so you can take a look at what's in them and so forth. And we have been recording this. I don't quite know exactly what's happening with the recordings because that's on the Northeast Hub side. They may or may not become available. In terms of the next workshops, we have a project development workshop happening tomorrow. So that talks through all of the elements of developing an energy project from the idea through to implementation, which I will be leading. We have a chat on Friday, same time for all of these workshops, chat on Friday about financing projects, looking at different funding options, financing models, commercial models for community energy project development. And then finally on Tuesday, which if you let me just check my calendar, is the 17th, same time, we talk about a bit about community governance and procurement. So some or all of you may have signed up for those already. If you haven't signed up and you'd like to join, you're welcome to just drop us an email and we'll send you the links. And lastly, thank you very much for your time. An information-packed morning, and I really appreciate the participation and the knowledge and the experience everyone shared. And yeah, as I said, I hope this was a useful day for you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you,
very
yes.
much, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye
Thanks.
for now.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Sandy, have you got a couple of minutes?
Yep. Yeah, I can stay on.
Reece, do you want to stop recording as well?
Yeah, I'm just doing that.
Thanks. Go ahead, Sid.
Yeah, no.